Oh. So I press on this and can speak, right? I can press on this and can speak, right? Okay. Hi, hello, afternoon, good afternoon. Welcome to CityU. Welcome to CityU. I firstly, introduce myself first. I am Linda Lee, Director of the Research Center for Sustainable Hong Kong. And with me, we got two colleagues, and our Professor Liang and Professor Phyllis Mo. Professor Liang is jointly appointed by Department of Public and International Affairs, also School of Energy and Environment, and Professor Mo from Department of Accountancy. All of us are active members of the Sustainable Hong Kong Research Center for Sustainable Hong Kong. And we are very pleased today to release the final report of our recently completed work on estimating financed emissions in Hong Kong. The financed emissions by Hong Kong banks and asset managers. So I think this, we hope it would be a useful exercise, okay? Not only for the academic in the community, but especially for the policy and also for our sustainability discussions to move forward the net zero agenda. We are very pleased that we have you here and also people online joining us to review the report, and also we hope that this is only a small step. Of course, time is running out, okay, to meet the net zero, but every step needs to be made still diligently and cautiously, right? Because we have to make every step steady and well. Well, before we proceed, I would like to invite Professor Eddie Hui, who is the head of Department of Public and International Affairs, who co-organized this seminar, to say a few words of welcome. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Linda, for giving us a very good instructions of the teams and this project. May I now extend my warmest welcomes to all of you, our honorable guests here, and also to the Professor Lee and her team. For this seminar today. This is actually our greatest honor of the department, PIA, to have you here enjoying the talk, the content of seminar. Linda just mentions Research Center for Sustainable Hong Kong, which is actually a very important center in the department. Out of the other research centers we have and that we have, it is an interdisciplinary and cross sectoral research platform founded in 2017, and to encourage constructive interactions and collaborations between people of different training and diverse cultures, to open horizons of visions and to nurture building visions contributing to sustainable development of Hong Kong. More than that, the center, CSHK in short, is an applied strategic development center at CityU, not just in the department, at CityU level as well. This is very important. I wouldn't be wrong. Okay, it housed two sustainable Hong Kong research hubs, and it also see as Hong Kong International Hub for the Belt and Road. The center director currently, of course, is Professor Linda Lee. Now, we have the seminar here. The seminar is a public dissemination seminar on the topic of estimations of financed emissions in Hong Kong and policy recommendations that you never miss. The project leaders include the three very excellent academics here, including Dong Li, our AP in the Department of PIA, also Professor Linda Lee, now professors of political science in PIA, and finally equally important, is Phyllis Mo, from a professor of accountants from Department of Accountants, College of Business, right? The project team will present the findings of their report today very shortly on leveraging on the established formulas of the global GHG accounting standard for the financial industry from the Partnership for Carbon Accounting Financials. They have already estimated Hong Kong's finance emissions, providing 4 policy recommendations at the same time. I'd like to take this opportunity to congratulate them on having their project compete successfully. Today is the announcement for all of you. Without further ado, may I invite the team to do the presentations. I'm sorry that I have something urgent to do with later on. I must excuse myself from the rest of the event today, but I'm sure you will have a lot to take away from it. Please enjoy. Thank you very much.
Well, before we proceed to the presentations, I would invite Professor Dong and Professor Mo to introduce our major findings and recommendations. Let us announce the formally, public release of the report first, right? And then I will invite all of us to take a group picture together to celebrate. Can we go to the QR code now? Yes. The next slide, yes. Can we all see the QR code? Yes, this one. So please, you can use the QR code to download a e-version, and then you can instantly share with it, in your own platforms and with your friends. Okay. So officially, it is now public. Thank you. Oh, before we proceed, can we take a group picture together? Shall we go out and join the group?
Oh, okay, then sit down. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Yeah. Okay. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Smile. Okay, you're good.
Okay, so let us go back to our important business. So Liang, your turn. Yes.
Okay, so I will. Yeah.
Let's press it. Yes.
Because they would control them.
Oh, okay.
So go to next slide.
Mm.
They will control them. Yeah, it's okay.
Oh, okay. So on behalf of the team, I will share the major results and also for our estimation on the finance emission in Hong Kong. So I think maybe the first thing we need to emphasize on the importance of how the finance sector will play a role to contribute on the carbon neutrality strategies. So maybe you can see this figure will show one example to see how the bank will offer the mortgage loans, and the mortgage loans will drive to the physical activities to construct buildings in Hong Kong, and also will drive to the emissions and maybe also the consumptions on the materials. So here we can see where and what and how the financial sector will finance the activities will play a very important role to affect on the carbon emission. That's why we need to pay attention to the carbon emission from the finance sector, because they will the driving force for the emissions in the different cities. And also the scope is also very important part to make the estimation on the emission. So we know now we have the scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions to account for the companies and also in the supply chains. And usually the company will report on the scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, but usually finance emission will be maybe it's not well reported by most of the companies. So here will be the simply the introduction on what is the finance emissions based on the definition and the concept on the supply chain carbon footprint and also the finance emission. So it is one part of the scope 3 emissions. And based on this figure, we can see usually maybe on the scope 3 they will offer some financial activities and it will drive to the carbon emission. So we try to account for this part of the emission, which is often missed part for the current reporting of the different companies. And we go to the major scope and also of this research. So we refer to the guidance by the PCAF. And also we also perform as a first try to estimate the finance emissions associated with the 3 major financial activities in Hong Kong and also in the year 2021. So they will include the bank business loans and also the residential mortgage loans and also asset management. So this table will summarize our focus the scope issues. So we focus on the scope 3. It is one part of the scope 3 emissions named finance emission. It will include the indirect emissions associated with the financial activities in the supply chain. For example, they will include the borrowers and or the entities, the scope 1, 2, and scope 3 emissions. So it's a very complex procedure to account for the finance emission, and also will offer the enlightening information for the different actions and policy makings by the different stakeholders. Then we come to the major results for our research. Okay, so based on the scope and also the definition on finance emissions, we estimate on the 3 major activities in the banks and also in the asset management. So the summary of the result can be seen in this table. So we can see on 2021, the Hong Kong's finance emission from the business loans, from the mortgage and also from the asset management, if the total number will be the 2.96 million tons from the mortgages and also the 31.61 million tons from the business loans, and also a major part will come from asset management that is equal to the nearly the 345 million tons. In total, the total number of the emission will be about nearly 400 million tons, and it is equivalent to nearly 11 times of the Hong Kong's wide emission based on the IPCC approach. We know it is mainly the on-site the emission from the fossil fuels. So we can see there's a major the impact come from financial sector in Hong Kong to contribute on the global greenhouse gas emissions. That's why we need to pay much attention to how we can redirect the financial sector to play a better role to contribute on the carbon neutrality strategies. And also, if we look into the intensity issues, the intensity will be about 105 tons CO2 emission per $1 million. Against something the numbers we need to pay attention to. It is the summary of our major results, and we further go to the results by different activities. So this slide will summarize on the business loans and associated emissions. Okay, so our result highlighted that is on 2021, according to the number of the Hong Kong MA and also based on the matter can see details on the report. The total business loans in 2024 will account to the nearly a very big number on the, you can see, and also the associated the carbon emission will be about 31.6 million tons. The emission intensity will be the 89.68 tons CO2 emission per $1 million. And if we look into the by sector information, we can see actually one major driving force for the carbon emission will be the investment and the loans go to the manufacturing sector, has higher carbon emission intensity. So redirect the investment flows to make them into the lower carbon intensity sector will be useful to reduce carbon emission in the future for Hong Kong and also for the financial sectors. And if we look into the figures on the mortgage loans, we can see the number will be, the total mortgage loans will be about $22,000 million in 2024. And also according to the total amount on the money and also based on the carbon emission factor, we can count for the total carbon emission associated with the mortgage loans will be as high as 2.96 million tons. So actually, this number is only based on the direct emission in buildings. We also to know if we look into the whole life cycle on the building, we know the material consumption in the building sector will also drive a lot of the carbon emission. So if we account to the total life cycle carbon emission or the embodied carbon emission in the building sectors, I believe the number will be much even higher. So this one is the only maximum, the number on the building sector driven by the mortgage loans in Hong Kong on the 2024. And finally, if we go to the asset under management, we can see there's a little bit different condition compared to the bank loans and also the mortgages. One condition in Hong Kong will be, we know the Hong Kong Securities and Futures Commission, SFC, they didn't require the asset manager to report on the portfolio information, for example, where we can have the carbon emission factors. So we use a mixed approach to estimate on the carbon emission. So we have checked many of the documents and the reports from asset management, and they are making the two conditions. One will be some asset manager, they will report their portfolio information. So based on this one, we can calculate on their carbon emission intensity based on the portfolio information and also the weighting based on the amount on the asset management. And second case will be some asset management, they did report their portfolio information, but they will disclose their average carbon emission intensity per $1 million. So in this case, we also have their reported value. So based on the portfolio value from the calculation and also based on the reported value, we can have the average carbon emission intensity the value. So you use this value and also multiply by the amount on the money, we can have the calculation for the total amount carbon emission from the asset management. This is how we can treat in the case on the asset management related carbon emissions. So based on this approach, we can have the results will be, you can see here. So one case will, for this case will show maybe the sample to show when they report their portfolio information, we can calculate on the carbon emission based on their by sector information. For example, the investment on the different sector like construction and technologies and also maybe the logistics. And we also have a sample will report their carbon intensity value. So we can, based on this value, we can have the average, the weighted average value to account for the total emission. So the average emission intensity by the portfolio data of the two asset measures in the samples will be about 80 and 81 tons CO2 emission per $1 million they put into the portfolios. And also based on the disclosed and also calculated values, we can have the weighted average, the emission intensity value that is about 113.45 tons CO2 emission per $1 million. And we can use this one for the others without reporting or disclosure on the carbon emission. So as a whole, we can have the total emission will be about 345 million tons CO2 emission, and the average intensity value will be about 113.45 tons CO2 emission per $1 million. So here, so if we look into the data, actually, we can see from the maybe the right side figure to show, even though we can have the reported data, actually they have the very big difference and gap. So we hope in the future, so if Hong Kong can require the asset manager to report their more information, for example, the portfolio information, it will really to help us to have the better estimation on the emission, carbon emission. It's also something we can uncover based on the estimation and some recommendation for the future actions in Hong Kong. Okay, so based on this value, we have the the CO2 carbon emission from the different the activities, and we also compare them to the international studies. So far, not so many the study on the financial emission because the data availability and also based on the approach. So we can find maybe from the 2019 to 2022, actually, there are 3 other studies on the UK for London and also the USA for the New York, and also one study on Canada. They also present maybe the financial hub in the Europe and also in the North America. So we compare our results with their result to uncover more information and some recommendations. So if we look into the dimension, for example, the scale and also the coverage on the accounting value and also the details, we can see our actual result is more rich information than the existing studies because we have to apply a different approach. And also if we compare to the carbon emission intensity from the different studies, we can see Hong Kong presents the lowest carbon intensity. For example, Hong Kong is only 105 ton CO2 emission per $1 million, but the number in the UK and in the USA is over the 150, and also it's even higher in Canada. The 400 ton CO2 emission per $1 million. The major reason will be, this depends to the behind the structure on the economy. Canada has the mining actually industry, so they have the massive investment in the mining industry, so it will drive to much higher carbon emission intensity. But Hong Kong actually they will invest more, for example, on the light industry and also the high tech. That's why Hong Kong also present lower value. So we need to think about on the details when we compare to the value, not only to see number, but also to think about what is the behind economic structure and the more detailed information to design the follow-up actions and the policy recommendations. So based on this, our results and also based on comparison on the international results, we can propose and think about many policy recommendations. This is actually why we show the value and also hope this can be some important the benchmark information for the policymaker to think about, to see the condition and also to offer the follow-up actions. So I will give the time to Phyllis to show how we can use our result to generate some recommendation for the future transition actions. Thank you so much. This is my sharing on the results. Yeah. So time is the Phyllis. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Dong's explanation of the our methodology and also the main result. So based on the findings, we put forward 4 policy recommendations to advance the development of Hong Kong as a regional green finance hub, and as well as to contribute to the ongoing decarbonization effort in Hong Kong. So our first recommendation relates to the disclosure of climate-related information. So we recommended the Hong Kong MA and also the SFC should require all licensed financial institutions to submit ESG report covering all carbon emission data, including the financed emission. In addition, is that based on our estimation process, we have identified those kind of data gap. Therefore, in order to bridge the data gap, we recommend that, for example, the asset managers should provide the bi-sector financial activity information, and also to develop a localized bi-sector asset turnover ratio database to facilitate the estimation of finance emission. And our second recommendation is to motivate the financial institution to channel their investment and financing activity towards low carbon enterprises, as mentioned by Professor Dong. We recommend that financial institution can take a more active role in driving the low carbon transition. For example, bank can provide preferential interest rates to support those low carbon sector. And also the asset managers can adjust their investment portfolio from the high carbon, from their investment in high carbon sectors shift to low carbon sectors. In addition, is that the Hong Kong MA can also consider to reduce the regulatory reserve requirement for banks that meet the finance emission targets to provide more funding to support the low carbon business. To illustrate the effect of the shifting or the adjustment of the portfolio on the finance emission, we have carried out some simple simulation. Okay, so our first simulation is tried to simulate how the adjustment of bank loan portfolio, which were based on the 2021 figures, the total bank loan, and also our estimated finance emission factors, to simulate what will happen if we switch, for example, two of the high carbon intensity industry to low carbon sectors. For example, in this example, we assume that if 20% of if 10% of the loans from the high carbon intensity sector, such as the mortgage and the manufacturing sector, which is the blue colors in the left hand in the bar, and also the other is the darker one. Okay, we the lower bar is showing the bank loan portfolio based on the business as usual. That is the amount based on the 2021 figures. And then the upper bar is the our proposed or simulated portfolio of the bank loans. Okay, so if we assume to shift the 10% of the investment in or bank loan from the residential mortgage and also the manufacturing sectors to the renewable energy, that is the figures in the left one, okay, sorry, in the right end, and then we use the same estimation method to estimate what will happen the finance emission, okay, and the results show that that is in the figure 14. The results show that the finance emission of the new bank loan portfolio will be reduced by 6% of the total finance emission of our estimated one based on 2021 figures. And we carry out a similar simulation for the asset managers, and we assume that the asset manager also adjusts their investment portfolio from high carbon sectors to green business. And we assume that 20% of the investment from the two high carbon sectors, that is the industrial and also the energy sectors, which is the purple one. Okay, that is the, let me see whether I can point it out. That is the purple one, okay, and also the orange one, okay, and then shift to invest in the renewable energy, that is in the right size, okay. And then following the same estimation method, then our estimated finance or the simulated finance emission will be reduced by 7% compared to the 2021 estimated finance emission that we have estimated. So this give a simple illustration what is the effect, okay, of this kind of change in the portfolio, okay. And then our third recommendation relating to the improving the green finance certification framework. And we recommend to improve the existing certification framework to ensure the applicability and also the relevance. And because to establish such a certificate framework requires input from research and also active participation from different stakeholders. Therefore, we recommend that we need to strengthen public-private partnership with emphasis on the collaboration between the government, regulators, financial institution, industry stakeholders, and university and also research institutes to drive more high-impact research and innovation to enhance the development and the efficiency of the green finance market. And our last recommendation relate to the capacity building by strengthening the training of green-related talents. Our center's recent study on green jobs in Hong Kong indicates that the green training and professional qualification framework require further investment and effort. And actually, Hong Kong can better equip its workforce for the transition towards a sustainable economy by expanding more green job opportunities and also increasing targeted training program. And recently, the government has issued as a vision statement commits to developing capacity enhancement program for different stakeholders doing in the market. And we recommend in order to turn the vision into action, specialized committee should be established to step up the planning and guidance in the provision of diverse sustainable training programs. And in the long run, we consider that maybe a licensing system should be established to enhance the, to ensure the quality of the green-related practitioner in the market. So that's all for our, that's the 4 recommendations we have put forward. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Phyllis, and thanks, Liang. Well, so I think we have given a very succinct and concise summary. You know, of course, now is the time for questions and comments. Well, actually, we are so fortunate, okay, to have you coming to us, and of course, participants online. And especially, you know, I take a look at the participants today. Okay, we have you know, people in the business. Okay, a business broadly defined, but actually quite a large number is actually on the sustainability related and ESG, you know, related fields. So very important players and contributors to this net zero transition efforts. And we have governments and regulators and also professional bodies with us. And your role obviously is very important because we all know that sustainability belongs to one of those very challenging common pool problem, right? No individual or no corporates or even no single country can solve it by themselves. So we need a lot of coordination, and you know, so that's why professional bodies, from professional bodies to regulators and to government, their role is instrumental and central. And of course, we have academia, you know, and NGOs. You know, they are very important in propelling the efforts. You know, I know, you know, Jenny, you would like to maybe kick off the Q&A sessions, you know? Yes.
Yeah, I'm very happy that we hear all of you here. As a representative of the accounting and financial council, we have a responsibility to ensure the transparency and accountability on how these emissions are reported. As reported recommends, I think not only to strengthen the emission disclosure is important, but we also need to ensure the assurance of the disclosure in this process, which will provide the confidence to the reported data accuracy, enables our stakeholders to make the informed decision and address the concerns on the greenwashing. And we have been working very hard in driving the work on the sustainability assurance in Hong Kong. And AFRC is a member of the CSG, which is the Green and Sustainability Finance Cross-Agency Steering Group. And we are just part of it, and we'll continue to work on that to push for a roadmap of the sustainability assurance in Hong Kong. And this is something that we have to take some time to continue. It's a long journey, and Silva is my colleague working very hard on this. Yeah, so we'll be happy to hear the challenge or the concerns in complying in working on this roadmap. So it's good to have to listen to your sharing to help us informing our roadmap. Yeah.
Makes sense. Yeah, I think we would achieve things better. Yes, Lionel?
Hi, thank you. I'm Lionel from City Exchange, Simple Finance Lead. And firstly, I think thank you. This is really interesting. And I think what's really surprising for me is on page 21, where manufacturing takes such a small proportion of business sector loans, but it's such a high amount of like emissions intensity overall. And I think in Hong Kong, we always sort of assume that the biggest footprint we have is in the building sector. And I think a lot of efforts, even within the civil society space on decarbonization, focus on buildings. But this kind of makes me like, reflect that like we're missing other areas such as manufacturing. But that leads to, I guess, the question, which is kind of on your approach. You've taken the top-down approach to modeling this, and then you've mentioned that the UK and the US reports take a bottom-up approach. I understand that in Hong Kong, there are limitations. Our colleague mentioned about like data and reporting, so it makes sense given costs and so on to do this top-down approach. But I just wonder if in the manufacturing sector, like what can we do to figure out where is the highest marginal impact for a dollar on investment in the manufacturing sector? Like how can we get to the point where we can build a model that does a bottom-up approach and can figure out, like with those sort of bar charts you have, how can we sort of allocate that so it's most effectively in the right manufacturing sectors, whether it's steel or cement and so on?
Oh, okay. So I think I can offer maybe some of my insights actually to your question. Actually, we have some academic approach to make some simulation for for marginal effect. Like in Hong Kong, we have the use of the model. We have the very detailed information on different national, different sector information. For example, in Hong Kong, the table will include about 130 the sectors and also their output and also their emission we can account. So based on this kind of the information, we can make some simulation. For example, the transfer of the outcome, and also how the change on the carbon emission. It is feasible, I think, from the academy, but I think maybe in the practice and also in policy making, we also need to think about on the balance. Maybe the manufacturing actually they have the very much higher carbon intensity. So if we look into the carbon emission, but also have the very good, strong effect on the job creation and also contribution on the economy. So when we think about on the balance between the carbon emission and also the job creation and also the economic contribution, we have to maybe find a maybe better way to balance on all the factors. So maybe the answer will be, in theory, we can account for the marginal effect and also to offer the optimal pathway in the future for transition. But in the real practice, actually, you need to think about on something beyond carbon emission. This is also why nowadays it's very important part to offer maybe the more feasible and also inclusive and also the maybe sustainable approach to redirect on the investment strategies. Something actually we are also making some efforts to offer some information. This is some very academic perspective from my side. Yeah, thank you so much.
Well, let me follow up. I think, the findings that manufacturing turns out to account for quite a big share. Well, obviously, the high emission intensity of manufacturing, I think we expected that, right? Is that maybe, what we didn't expect, or maybe kind of, because we have the perception that Hong Kong has been a services hub, right? But services hub, yes, but what do we service? Financial services, we service also the manufacturing industry in the Greater Bay Area, right? And beyond maybe, but especially in the Greater Bay Area. So to that extent, we are services, but the things that we service, because the finance emissions is basically measuring the things they service, right? So a lot of the service is manufacturing industry, and then while they are still upgrading, but they're still in process, right? So I think that is one thing in terms of strategy, how to reduce our finance emissions. Of course, we can move away from a bit of this manufacturing, but another strategy is, or maybe parallel strategy is obviously to help those manufacturing industry to get a little bit greener, right? So I think that is always, I think that should be the direction regardless of this results. But I think these results are just send us a reminder. Yes, we are really part of the Greater Bay Area.
Okay.
Or you speak so that the people
Yeah, you're
online
right.
can hear you.
Okay, thank you. I just like to follow up on what Professor Lee you commented. Yeah, on the one hand, it's that we as a financial center, and I actually did look at the Hong Kong M&A stats for several years. Actually, much of the loans were not actually utilized here in Hong Kong, other than those residential mortgages or office buildings. Much of that were used by the borrowers elsewhere. Yeah, the Greater Bay Areas a lot. So essentially, we are regulating potentially the emissions in mainland China. But on the other hand, Hong Kong is a service economy. Over 85% of its GDP is all from services. For example, you know, as a financial professional, if you look at whether it's accounting, legal, investment banking, commercial bank, all of those, we consume a lot of papers in order to satisfy those requirements. For example, we need to pass out a prospectus for every sales transaction, but that's 300 pages. But you know, we don't manufacture papers here in Hong Kong. The emissions will actually happen elsewhere, whether we imported the papers from Indonesia, mainland China, US, elsewhere. Because I was in that industry before, a lot of emissions and pollutions along the industry line. So how can we, several-fold probably. The first is, yeah, some of the emissions happen here, but much of those will happen outside, either as the loan users or actually we purchase services or products. Actually, those all happened outside Hong Kong. But if we focus on just measuring Hong Kong's emissions, probably Hong Kong is not a good representative of the general economy, global economy. So how can we exert the kind of impact that our policy proposals intend to do? That's something that I have been struggling with.
So I think I can offer maybe some fundamental information. We know we have the two methods to account for the carbon emission. One is IPCC. So IPCC is focused on the jurisdiction, for example, different regions and on-site emission. And second method will be we have the Scope 3 emission accounting for the companies. The company can be in different places in the world. So it's very difficult for the local government to control the Scope 3 emissions in the global, maybe the market. It's one big challenge. So I think maybe one way will be we should establish some international, maybe the alliance and also maybe the guidance, how we can better to unify and also to report and to manage and to even to audit on the supply chain carbon footprint. So actually it's very big, complex work, I think. The second part will be maybe we can also to offer even the stronger, for example, maybe the disclosure requirement and guidance on the global companies. Maybe if we can unify, maybe for example, the carbon emission measurement, we can offer maybe some better measurement for the carbon emission on supply chain. Actually, it's very big. For example, we can offer the carbon audit and the carbon, maybe the tracing, maybe the tools and also the database, and also to unify the global value for the different companies on the world, and also to even to make some platform is open to all the market. Actually, the company can report the data in the unified format. You offer the easier approach to manage on the carbon emission in the supply chain. Actually, it's I think a tough work, and it also requires the global effort to offer maybe the international collaboration on these kind of issues. Actually, I agree with you. It's very difficult because there's different maybe the gap between the jurisdiction measurement on carbon emission and also the global supply chain issues. It's very complex. The questions. Yeah, thank you. Next, some of my insights.
Okay, maybe I try to respond to Jerry's the first comment about the emission generated by the paper submission, etc. I think actually now in Hong Kong is promoting using the e-prospectus instead of printing the prospectus. And also recently the Hong Kong Stock Exchange also encouraged that instead of distributing the printed copy of the annual report to shareholders or investors, they are promoting that the company can just upload the e-version to the website and then to reduce the paper printing. That is in that way to help to reduce the emission because of the printing of various documents, etc. Yeah.
For this reason, we have only printed 100 copies of this report. Okay, so it would be very rare. Okay, there will be no reprint. Okay.
But can I ask one more question? Maybe we should allow more people to, just on that note, one other thought on the practitioners' perspectives. The first is regarding the ESG disclosures. You know, that has been in very heated debate or discussions. Even the Hong Kong Stock Exchange now requires some sort of a disclosure. What has happened, again, based on my limited knowledge, is that it has put on a lot of pressure and disclosure burdens to the companies, particularly those industry or sector, for example, small manufacturing firm in steel mills, coal mining, electricity generation, all those things. Many firms actually incur a lot of cost in doing that. And also that's on their reporting side. And again, that's on the other side, actually, over the years, I actually happen to occasionally query into the service provider side. Actually, quite a number of organizations working very hard behind the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, and some other people actually with a more, I would say, profit-making motive in promoting that industry so that they can have more business, so that something coming from the regulator Stock Exchange will provide that. We all know that. That's, of course, business side. That would, to some extent, create certain, I guess, doubt or barriers for Hong Kong to continue to attract more businesses, financial transactions coming to Hong Kong. So that should be a balance. The other point is about that balance is that who is more close to or in a more advantageous position to regulate these things, whether the financial sector financing regulator is the best. For example, every country has EPA, and for example, the Chinese government has done a lot, for example, to close down those steel mills or doing all of that. And there's other regulations they have to get cleared before they can even go public, things like that. Is the Hong Kong M&A, or if we issue certain rules, more effective in regulating that, or we only can serve to deter those guys or make it difficult for those guys to come in to get listed in Hong Kong, respond, doing all those things. So I, as a practitioner, I have been struggling with all of these conflicting ideas. I love to hear your views, points, comments on that.
Thanks, Jerry.
I
think you raised actually quite a fundamental question, right? I think, you know, obviously, you know, there could be a lot of controversies and maybe irregularities, you know, in human practices, right? All kinds of practices that you can find. Maybe there are some abuses, right? Maybe lack, you know, imperfections, right? Or maybe nuances in all kinds of motivations. Yeah, it could be, right? But on the other hand, I think the ultimate challenge is existential, right? So unless we continue the debate, which has been ongoing for some time, right, regarding whether there is climate change, right, or whether the climate change is really that harmful, right, then you know, because to my understanding, that debate has been ongoing for decades, but seems to that, you know, globally there has come to a kind of a consensus that we cannot continue this forever, and it's time to act, right? Otherwise, the challenge would be really quite disastrous. So I think if we don't want to, if we honor that kind of very difficultly arrived global consensus, and continue on the process of how to mitigate the challenges and how to really narrow the gap. I think the nuances and the abuses that you mentioned, yes, I think some of them, they do exist. Okay, I'm as a sociologist. Okay, I think there must be some things that we can improve better. But I think that's why we need a lot of discussions. That's why we need regulators or regulators of regulators, right? That's why we need check and balances, right? I think that's important, and that's why despite the consensus, we still have a lot of debates. Yes, Nigel? Yes, we'll come to you.
Sure. Sorry, maybe just like a tangential question, but it came up as you were talking on sort of your next research steps and whether or not you would look at something like value at risk from carbon pricing for these sectors. I mean, you've built a pretty interesting model. Now, how do you sort of add more scenarios and things into what the model is telling us?
Yeah.
So if like you'll be adding things such as, carbon pricing as like a scenario that would you put into this, and how would that affect the value of these loans, for example?
You want to address this in a minute? Maybe we listen to this question first.
Yeah, thanks. Interesting presentation. I'm looking at the breakup of emissions, and most of it is coming from assets under management, right? I just had a clarification on how that is calculated, because from what I understand, you have calculated estimated emissions intensity from 2 asset managers in Hong Kong and used that number to kind of impute the number for entire assets under management, right? So Fidelity and JP Morgan, so you have estimated intensity, and then you have used that average number to calculate for the entire assets under management. That number comes to the biggest portion of financed emission. So, I mean, my question is, so you say available portfolio information. So, I mean, just for my understanding, are these the only 2 asset managers disclosing portfolio information, or are these the portfolio managers disclosing emissions information? I mean, what's the available portfolio information?
So I think I can give you maybe some more information. Actually, I think the calculation will be based on the 7 samples. We have the 2 samples that they disclose their portfolio information. For example, the by sector amount on the asset management, and the 5 components also disclose their average carbon intensity. So we use this 7 value to get average the carbon intensity value to account for the total emission. This is our approach. Maybe so. I think in the company side, actually, it's very difficult for company to report their carbon emission by portfolio. So I think they can report their portfolio information because we have the carbon emission factor for each sector. For example, if we have the portfolio information, it means we can calculate their emission based on the sector they reported, and also based on the carbon emission factor for that sector to account for the total emission. So there's no need for them to report the carbon emission in each sector. They only report the portfolio information. Then we can estimate the carbon emission based on the portfolio information. It means the by sector carbon emission factor can be applied into the estimation. It's something we hope maybe in the future to enrich on the reported information for us to better estimation. Yeah, that is our maybe some of our insights for you.
So okay, just for me to understand, for these 2 asset managers, do they provide both portfolio information as well as emission information by sector?
So if they offer the portfolio information, so portfolio means maybe the by sector amount, right? So for different sector, we have the carbon emission factor for each sector.
Oh,
so if
you apply factors.
Yeah, so you have a factor, so we can calculate on the emission based on their reported portfolio information.
But other asset managers in Hong Kong don't report portfolio information.
So actually we have searched on the reporting. Actually, I think we have searched 18 major asset managers in Hong Kong. So only 2 reported their portfolio information because SFC didn't require them to report. It's one situation in Hong Kong so far. Yeah, maybe can be improved in the in the near
Right,
future.
thank you.
Yeah. So I think carbon price, of course, carbon price carbon price will be projected to increase, for example, to calculate on the company's cost. For example, if we can simulate on the carbon price scenarios, actually we can offer some information for the company. For example, maybe how your cost in the future can be enhanced. This one will be in return will become the motivation for company to be more willing to report their carbon emission and also to offer their actions to reduce carbon emission. So it's possible to offer some simulation based on carbon price scenario. Actually, we have other projects also use this approach to offer them the information. If you didn't reduce your carbon emission in the future, for example, by 2030, your cost on the carbon will be increased a lot. So it will become the heavy burden for companies. So it will be their motivation to be more willing to offer us the information. But I think so far in Hong Kong, we didn't have the carbon price yet, but maybe in the future we can design maybe some mixed policy mix to offer this information for the company so that they can also make their own simulation to design their maybe their actions in the near future. This is my response to your part.
Hi, thank you for the very interesting report. I think there are a lot of calculations going on in the compilation of the entire study. And then I found the first, especially the first policy recommendation really applicable in Hong Kong, because like in the past, when we were doing ESG reporting for the listed company, there were quite a lot of clients who are financial investment firm, and then their emissions is rather small, but then actually they are doing a lot of investment in different properties, and then those are exactly the thing that were not being reported. And then so I think the first recommendation about asking the non-listed private fund house to do the reporting of their finance emission would be really useful. But then I'm wondering what is the methodology that they can adopt, and how well established are they, and how non-debated are those methodology, because they can be quite difficult. And then also it is like by sector, then within one sector, there's like, for example, building sector, there can be different buildings that are really different in terms of their emission performance, and manufacturing that there can be investment into some new startup that are really no emission in manufacturing. But so then if it is one off for one entire sector, it may be difficult to look at the investment portfolio. So that's my questions about what kind of methodology each fund house can use.
Actually, I think so if we look into the definition on the financial emission, actually it's very difficult for companies to understand. It's very complex. For example, this one part of the scope 3 emission, and in the PCAF, they offer very detailed methodology how the company can calculate the carbon emission to present their financial emission. But the approach is very complex to understand. So I think maybe one way is if we can offer some easy to do, for example, the guidance on the indicator, if the company can only offer very simple data, and maybe the tool can calculate on the financial emission, it will be easier way for a company to report on their financial emission. For example, I give you one example. If we can build one platform, and platform can ask for maybe the downstream company like the UST and maybe the power company, they report their consumption of energy, and we can use this one to get the financial emission for the upstream company like a bank. And also, as mentioned, it's one way to simplify the issue, I think. But so far, to me, it's a little bit complex to calculate on. So even me, the way I read on the PCA, it's still very difficult for me to understand the very details. So maybe we can try to simplify the requirement on the disclosure to promote on reporting for financial emissions. Maybe one way we can proceed in the near future. For example, some platform will be easy way to compile the emission from the downstream companies to offer the financial emission data. Yeah, I think.
Carrie first, and then come to you. Okay.
I think one of the objective is to encourage investors to invest on more carbon efficient buildings. I think that is the intention. But the issue is, because I've been working on, Lina knows I've been working on the building industry's carbon emission, energy efficiency, these sort of things. The issue is, well, how can they determine whether a property is energy efficient or not. Or when you're comparing 3 or 4 buildings, how do you compare which one is more energy efficient? Because it's rather complicated, because the industry has not yet a aligned way of measuring method, benchmarking method, and because as you said, it's very complicated. For instance, if you just look at the figures, energy per square meters also, which area are they measuring? Internal floor area, gross floor area, etc. Now that is one thing. And also there are buildings that is, say, for instance, like connected to central district cooling system. So a part of their energy consumption is not in there. And for instance, like some buildings, they use fan coil unit systems, which the energy, the energy is charged to the tenants, while central air handling units, the fan power is charged to the landlords. So therefore, when you look at the figures, it's very difficult to tell whether which building is more energy efficient or not. So therefore, what we are trying to do in the past years or is to try to align this measuring methods, database, etc. So this is needed. Now that is the first thing that is relatively easy. The second problem is the scope 3, that is the embodied carbon. Now, if the building is newly built, then I think in today's standard it's relatively easy to get the data. But the issue is when there's an acquisition, then we cannot account for the whole embodied carbon because the building life is, say, 100 years. So when they buy it, the life is only 50 years. Then how do you account for that? Or is it too detailed to be taken into account? Is it necessary to take it into account? Because a lot of financial institutions, they are looking at acquisitions, selling and buying projects. I don't know whether this is catered into that or not.
So actually, the PCAP, they offer some guidance on calculation for building energy for mortgage loans. Actually, either guidance they use the flow areas and also the carbon emission coefficient for the different flow area per flow areas to account for the mortgage loans. For example, for 30 or 50 years, they attribute the carbon emission to different years based on the length of the loans. This is their method. So they think about on allocation. So if the method is feasible to account and also to allocate the carbon emission in a single year for the buildings in the loan period. That is their method.
If you're looking at relatively, which one is more, say, since that building is, well, say 20 years old, I think it's very difficult to get the embodied carbon data in the building.
Yes, we need some database. For example, actually, I do some research on the building life cycle carbon emission account. We use some spatial data and approach to account for the building stock and the materials. They will be the foundation to estimate on the embodied carbon. So I hope in the future, Hong Kong can try to build some inventory database. For example, the building stock will be the foundation for account for the embodied carbon. So if we can build this kind of a database, actually, I think we can offer some benchmark the information and also can support on the science-based estimation on carbon emission in the building lifestyle. It's possible. For the European Union, they have the database on the building stock. It can offer very strong the information for people to account for the life cycle carbon emission buildings. So maybe this will be some future.
But if you're using an indicative figure, from statistics, so that means that it's very difficult to find which one is more carbon intensive.
If we use the data from a setting, actually, I think if we have the very detailed, for example, the flow areas data, for example, for each year, there will be some new generated flow areas, and we can account for the building materials to support on set flow areas. Means maybe based on some estimation on the building shape and the building height, and based on the flow area, we can account for the material consumption for building. And then we can also have the carbon emission. That's require a lot of data actually, so not so easy to do, I think.
Well, before I come to you, okay, because I just got a comment from an online participant He just gave it to me. But I think his comment is actually related to the discussion we have just now, what Kerry commented, and actually that addressed the earlier comments from Jerry about the need for balance and how does, I mean, from the business point of view, I mean, the practitioner point of view, you know, I think the task of getting comprehensive reporting is getting very difficult to manage, right? Very difficult to manage. And and I think that this coming from the participants also asking a question about from a perspective of the SMEs, right? So for the listed companies, they're already having a hard time of doing, you know, meeting the requirements, complying with the, you know, more stringent sustainability reporting standards. Not to say the SMEs, right? And you know, because SMEs actually are the bulk of the business, and then they are accounted for quite a lot of the emissions, right? So how do we help them so that they can help the earth, right? And help the community. I think so. So I think actually what Kerry also, you know, the early discussion about, you know, of the complexity, right? The complexity in buildings and in other sectors actually to getting things done. I mean, the reporting, I think really is thought-provoking. So really require us to go back to square one, thinking about what actually are we looking for, right? We actually looking, you know, we are looking for more efforts to reduce emissions. So the reporting is only a means to remind everybody that, have you done well? Have you done your homework, right? Are you moving in that direction, in the right direction, right? So on the one hand, we do need some assessment. Well, we are from the education sector, right? We all know that, you know, we always need some text and some quiz, right? We need to give some scores, but because we need that to propel improvement and efforts in the right direction. But we end up with too many texts and quiz, and then students would be simply test oriented without getting a good education. I think maybe it's time also we think about it. But actually, one insight, actually, I just come up to my mind, okay, right now. Our estimation, actually, we make a lot of compromises when we are trying to work on this estimation. Because ideally, we all know that it's better to have those bottom-up approach, right? So bottom approach, getting the data from everybody, right? And then we help them to do having an aggregate. Of course, that would be the most accurate. But we simply don't have enough. Even if we come up with some samples, the samples are too small, right? It would be meaningless, right? Would be meaningless. So we end up with a top-down approach. A top-down approach, of course, is less precise, right? I mean, it's less granular, but it tells us the big picture. So I think the big picture telling us how well Hong Kong is in terms of our finance emissions, right? Are we on par with other financial center, right? And then although we don't have a big pool of those bottom-up data, we do have some, right? We do have some. So we use those small n to do a more granular analysis, and we take a look at the industrial structures. And then I think this is some kind of compromises, and then we keep looking at the big picture. I think that may be some thoughts that we should always remind us in thinking about how to close the data gap. Yes.
So I just had a brief comment on SMEs and reporting. I think, you know, even the international standard setters, they recognize the fact that, you know, it's not the same burden for like larger companies versus smaller companies. So ISSB, like, you know, if you see many of their drafts and even the recent jurisdictional guide, like, you know, they place an emphasis on proportionality, right? So I think when these reporting standards come in, like usually they come in a phased manner, like larger reporters first, listed companies and so on, and then, like, you know, they think about SMEs and so on. And they also kind of make this distinction between you know, that what kind of reporting reporters can do, qualitative versus quantitative. So I think they don't insist that you know, companies report on quantitative measures, like, for example, financed emissions or something, if the burden is high, then the alternative is qualitative approach, right? So how are they managing their emissions? Like, what is their approach for doing it? What are the steps they are taking, and so on. So there is an option for reporters to do descriptive reporting rather than very quantitative calculations based reporting and so on. So I think, there are ways, I mean, the sentiment is well understood, but it is well understood by international standard setters and jurisdictions. I think that's what I wanted to highlight.
I saw the comparison between UK, US, Hong Kong, and well, what is really the what does it really tell us? Is it telling us, well, Hong Kong is better than the others, and is it and is there a reason for it? Say, for instance, like for the building sector globally, the carbon emission is about 40%. Hong Kong is 60%. Now, does it mean that Hong Kong is worse than others? That is not true, because Hong Kong do not have heavy industry. So therefore, comparatively, Hong Kong's building sector its carbon emission is much higher than the others. So therefore, I'm just trying to see, well, what does it really mean, this comparison?
So actually, the data from the UK and the US is based on both of the app that have the single banks and the data to compare into the final emission. So they have a lower coverage, you can see from the table. And Hong Kong, we use a top-to-down approach. So it means they can cover the 100% on the total emission. So the coverage of the study will be very different from the Hong Kong to the UK and the US case. This is one thing we try to present. And second one will be, so if we only look into the value, of course, Hong Kong is lower because Hong Kong behind the structure of the economy is different. Hong Kong mainly, the emission mainly come from the asset management, and they will invest into the light industry, the lower emission. But the UK and the USA have the larger investment on the manufacturing, so will increase maybe their carbon emission. So maybe we can not only to look into the field, but also to think about on the behind information. For example, for the UK and the USA, so if we have the benchmark information like the emission presented here, actually we can do the simulation for them. For example, in the future, if they can make some transition for the investment strategy, how much they can reduce. And also for Hong Kong, we can also do a similar way. And also the same for the Kenya. So here is only some general comparison. In the future, we try to investigate more detail. For example, how about the very detailed the structure information for the different economy behind the numbers, and also we also try to do the different simulation for the region to see how the marginal benefit come from different regions. You know, maybe for Hong Kong, the lower emission means maybe the marginal benefit may be also lower, and also maybe for UK and also for Canada, even though they have a higher emission, but it means maybe in the future they may have the higher margin benefit. So Anthony, do think about this is the complex information. Here is on the primary comparison to show, because this is the only full study in the world so far to present on fancy emission. That's why we put them together to offer the general information to the audience. Yeah, this is.
In other words, we simply don't know enough. Okay. We don't know enough, because UK, US, they use bottom up, and they actually, in their reports, they're very frank and saying that they cover only actually a very small portion of the whole picture. But nonetheless, that's the data we have. So we try to present it. And I think one feature that stands out of this imperfect comparison, okay, is that Hong Kong's emission intensity is actually lower, or on a par, right? It's actually not bad. In other words, we're not doing badly, okay. As an aggregate, okay. So that is maybe one of the message we can get from there.
The four cases altogether to tell the same. Actually, the fact is the financial emission is much larger than imagination. That is, all the four cases can tell us. For example, in UK, they mentioned about the financial emission from the case study actually is nearly 8 times the national maybe carbon emission. The Hong Kong actually the same. Over 10 times than the IPCC method accounting on Hong Kong emission. So we need to pay intensive attention to the financial emission to design for the follow-up actions. We can also learn from the 4 cases.
Over there first. Sorry.
Thank you so much. I'm Tiger. I'm from Greenpoint Data Solutions. So we are a startup that try to create a free data platform for SMEs. But I really agree with what Professor Dong you just said, that we need to find the local data. And because, like, for instance, if we currently calculate via PCAP methodology, I think a lot of times in Hong Kong for smaller asset management, we use like level 4 and 5. Basically, you have no, I would say, not much, realistic data to calculate out. So I definitely agree with that. But we also want to find out those localized data points and emission factors. So like in your estimation, how long do we need to find those data, and how much data points do we need to create like a really meaningful data sets for that?
Oh, so I think ideally we hope we can have the portfolio information from as much as the ideal condition. But now so far in Hong Kong, it's very few data to show the bisector information. So we hope in the future, maybe the ideal condition will be the bank and also as measure they can offer the bisector information, for example, which sector we know, and also we can find the carbon emission factor for that sector to account for the emission. This is ideal condition. But now actually it's very few information. So this is one thing we can get from actually our estimation. And also the second part will be, and also maybe one way we can also to do in the future will be if we can build some platform. So if we can collect the enough data from the downstream component, for example, investee and borrowers, can also help us to compile the information. So maybe I think we can do the two direction. One is we can improve the data maybe condition to include more portfolio and by sector data is very necessary for estimation. And second direction will be we try to include maybe the more downstream and maybe the company's data. For example, even simple one is enough. For example, the company's consumption of energy will be very useful for us to compile for the total emission from the bottom to up. This is something we hope to can improve in the near future. Thanks.
I'm Albert Cheung, adjunct professor of the CityU and Accountancy department. And in fact, I appreciate that the team, together with the research center, has done quite a lot of initiative, especially research in this area. And then I actually appreciate the 4 recommendations that the center or the team actually put forward. In fact, my question is a bit more from the top. And I appreciate that you have been actually stepping a larger step towards a very large picture. I'm interested to know whether the team or the research center has actually has any plans to extend it to either to China or to at least to Shenzhen, because Shenzhen is actually so close together. And in fact, quite a lot of either listed company or the listed financial institution actually have most of the elements in China or even in Shenzhen. So that the data or the overall whatever the basic element will actually be much more to enhance the overall either the conclusion or the recommendation. So and I think it would be better if we can actually think about extend it to the area to China, so that we can actually make a bigger impact, so that we can actually not to train but to educate a larger part of it, because eventually the data will actually form most of the either the data or it may affect the overall result. And I think it will also help to make our step even more further. So any plans?
Yeah, thank you, Albert's comments. And I think our study will not be just a one-off study, okay? And it will be our great pleasure if we can have the opportunity to promote or to introduce our research study to the other area, in particular the Greater Bay Area. Yeah, and we welcome all other collaboration opportunities. Yeah.
Reason why I actually mentioned Shenzhen, because Shenzhen is rather quite close to Hong Kong and quite similar to Hong Kong in that they have also have a stock exchange in Shenzhen. They also have non-manufacturing, trying to get into the servicing or financial industry, etc. So it's rather similar. So if that could actually be extended, the sample extended, whenever that could actually enhance the overall either the recommendation or conclusion, you know, in this subject.
No, I'm just thinking I'd like to invite the online participants also to ask questions for time being. Okay. Yes. Oh, I thought.
Hi, I'm Kelvin. Just one very general question. Actually, I was an auditor before, and I come across with some clients like they are some overseas banks, so they have maybe somehow a smaller office in like a small Hong Kong branch, and then they often come across many difficulties in regulatory reporting, like HKMA reporting, and then by one of the recommendation one, having more stringent disclosure requirement, is it possible that we are deterring possible investments in Hong Kong? Just one of my ideas. Thank you.
I think put it this way, because I think we have that discussion a while ago about calibrating a good balance, right? Yes, I think we certainly agree that we need to calibrate a good balance. But on the other hand, I think right now Hong Kong actually is not on the high side in terms of requirements. So I think there will be a need for Hong Kong to improve a little bit on the disclosures. But at the same time, personally, I think I subscribe to the idea that Hong Kong as a community, we should contribute to the global discussion on this standard setting. That we need to be mindful of actually what Jerry remind us, okay, and of course your remind as well, that we need to keep about the how broad the community, the business community can take it. So on one hand, I think we need to do more as a community in order for us to meet the challenge of climate change, but at the same time, I think we need to how to do it more smartly, rather because I think perfect information, is an ideal, and we can sometimes be too greedy, right? And never will be enough, okay? And then when we have a lot of information, we don't know how to deal with that, right? So I think that is always the challenge. Yes, Lionel. Yes.
Sure. My last question, I promise. Your recommendations, I was just wondering, when you were developing them, did you consider anything to do with like other tools that central banks might have in terms of prudential regulation or solvency, like Basel III related sort of requirements? And I mean, I think these are definitely useful recommendations, but were those things that you also thought about? And if not, why not?
To the second recommendation?
Well, just almost like, I think you've made recommendations about, issuing green bonds and improving disclosure, right? Disclosure, but what about more active ways that for central banks or financial regulators to tilt the sort of playing field through liquidity coverage ratios or solvency ratios? I think like the Hungarian central bank, for example, provides sets like a lower liquidity ratio for mortgage providers who are lending to green housing, right? Something along those lines. So, I mean, and that might be a little bit too far-fetched for more conservative markets or laissez-faire markets, but did you consider those kind of tools or approaches?
Yes, I think we have just put up the idea that the Hong Kong Monetary Authority can consider to lower the regulatory reserve requirement so that to release some of those reserve, so that to enhance, to let the bank that they can meet, for example, a target finance emission to lend more loans to support the low carbon sectors. That is our suggestion. Yeah, because I think during the COVID-19, that the Hong Kong MA has taken quite a similar approach by lowering the regulatory reserve requirement to support the SMEs. Yeah, so I think it may be possible that they can think about in that way. Yeah. Yes.
How the market play in promoting
Can you press the button?
listed companies are required to report their financial results biannually. In the US, it's quarterly, but the more and more Hong Kong listed companies have voluntarily released their results quarterly in order to meet investors' demand for information or to behave like a better government companies, things like that. I'm thinking that in this ESG requirement, definitely the market can play a significant role in discipline the companies or deciding whether to give someone credit or take someone's investment. That reminds me of, in the early times, Nike was accused of outsourcing its manufacturing of shoes to certain countries which have had a low level of labor requirement, for example, using child labor. Then customers outcried on that, and Nike became very disciplined later on when it outsourced the operations and things like that. I think that was probably more efficient. The market force was more efficient in disciplining these companies' behaviors and compliance with the better standard. I'm just wondering how we can incorporate the market forces in doing this.
I think this is already happening. It's a gradual process, right?
Yeah.
And then I think what the government, I mean, policy and regulators doing is that they are working hand in hand with the market, because free market doesn't mean that no government market, right? So I think that's what exactly is happening across the board in all countries. Yes, definitely. Yes. That's why we got a lot of businesses concerned about climate change and ESG, and then they are market players, right? They are market players. Yes. Well, can I invite our participants online? If you have any questions, please raise your hand and then you can speak directly. Of course, you can text, okay? And then I can, but I think it's better for you to just to speak. Our system allows that. Any one of you? You can just unmute yourself. And any questions from here? Yes, Alan?
Yeah, my name is Alan. I represent one of the accounting professional bodies. As you know me quite well, and since we talking about the local market, I believe it's better for the near future because this is very useful as a fundamental stage. I believe there's a lot of rooms that can be invested as well, and I believe like in the near future, it's good for us to comply with some of the regulation from the United Nations as well, because I also work for UNESCO as well, and sometimes we promote those 17 SDG goals. In that case, that would would be one of the standard for us to comply with the local market as well. And also another one is like if you need more information, and probably like you know, our chairman is the former chairman of EY and also the former chairman of the Hong Kong Chamber of Commerce, and I believe like the represent for the SME would be much more data can be provided as well, because the new definition of the SME in mainland China has been changed. Because like in Hong Kong, I always ask the people like, what's the definition of the SME? Actually, there's no final definition of version of the SME. Something people say like, oh, my company less than 50 people will be just treated as an SME. Well, in order to put it this way, I say if you are not listed company, I treat as SME at this stage in Hong Kong. But the new definition of this SME in Hong Kong, in China, now what they are claiming is the SME is whoever the company asset have more than 100 billion, they treat it as an SME. He's talking about the company asset only have a 10 billion. It's treated as a micro SME. In that case, that's why like well, we have to well, sometime in the near future, I believe like it's good for us to also comply with some of the regulation or new idea, the concept of some other country as well, in order to comply with the Hong Kong. Because now the Hong Kong is part of the mainland China. In that case, whenever we do it here in Hong Kong, it's better to comply with some of the what we call the national standard of some other country as well. In that case, this is for example, like Albert also mentioned about like it's good for us talking about the Greater Bay Area, and I believe like well, if you don't mind, and probably we can talk about align with some of the prestigious university in mainland China, some Peking U or Shanghai Jiaodong, to share some of the idea to each other as well. Yeah, thank you.
Welcome that. Yeah, we welcome that. Yes. Any more comments? Well, if not, we happily draw this to a close then, right? Yeah, I think now it's 5:07. So thanks for coming. And we hope that this is only a small step, and we look forward to working more on that, and especially working together with you. Okay, thank you. By the way, please send us your comments and feedback to this seminar, all right? Because we need your feedback. Thank you.